The Waterford crystal shattered against the wall behind me, missing my face by inches. Even in her rage, Victoria Sterling Reese's aim was precise. She'd meant to miss, but only just. "You were never our daughter," she hissed, her voice cutting through the stunned silence of 20 relatives. "Just a charity case we tolerated for appearances." But here's the thing about being discarded by millionaires. Sometimes they throw away their most valuable asset. 2 weeks after that dinner, Victoria was on her knees in my $900 a month studio apartment, begging for a signature that could save her from federal prison. I'm Celia Reese, and if you're watching this, please subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. This is how I went from being erased from a family fortune to controlling every penny of their $50 million legacy. Let me take you back to understand how a family could dispose of someone they'd raised for 27 years. I was adopted by the Sterling Reese family when I was 5, after my parents died in what the papers called a suspicious car accident. Victoria never let me forget that taking me in was Marcus's idea. Marcus, her father-in-law, the patriarch who built the Providence Foundation from nothing into one of New York's most prestigious charities. While I grew up in their Fifth Avenue penthouse, surrounded by Hermes bags and Waterford crystal, I was never truly one of them. Victoria made sure of that. Her biological daughter Isabel got the corner office at Sterling Real Estate by 30, complete with a Wharton MBA and a VP title. Me? I got the corner table at Starbucks, building my little computer drawing business, as Victoria called it. I was a UX UI designer, freelance, because no one in Victoria's circle would hire the charity case. They'd smile at galas while she introduced me as Marcus's little project, then turn away as if poverty might be contagious. The irony? I designed the entire Providence Foundation website for free, creating the interface that processed millions in donations. Victoria introduced me as the help at the launch party, but Marcus, he saw something different. I noticed he kept a photo booth picture of us in his wallet, taken at Coney Island when I was 12. He'd snuck me out for the day, bought me cotton candy, and told me stories about my parents. "They were heroes, Celia," he'd said, though he never explained what he meant. That photo ended up in his safety deposit box, right next to his will. I wouldn't learn why until much later. Sunday dinners at the Sterling Reese estate were exercises in calculated humiliation. I was required to attend. Family obligation, Victoria called it. But my place was literally and figuratively at the table's end. Past the cousins, past the in-laws, in what Isabel cheerfully dubbed Siberia. "Some people are born for greatness," Isabel would say, raising her champagne glass so the baccarat crystal caught the light just so. "Others, well, thank God for charity, right, Celia?" The relatives would chuckle uncomfortably while I focused on my plate, counting the minutes until I could leave. Victoria's cruelty was more refined. "It's so sweet that you're trying with your little website business," she'd coo when relatives asked about my work. Of course, it's nothing like real business. Isabel just closed a $40 million development deal, but everyone has to start somewhere. She'd pause, then add with surgical precision, "Though at 32, one wonders if it's still starting or just staying." Despite everything, I kept designing for the foundation, creating campaign materials that tripled their online donations. I told myself it was for Marcus, who'd email me privately to say how proud he was. But even he couldn't protect me from Victoria's systematic erosion of my self-worth. The strangest thing? Marcus had started leaving me cryptic voicemails. "The truth about your parents needs to come out," one said. Another, "I've put everything in writing. When the time comes, you'll understand." But before I could ask what he meant, before I could schedule that lunch he kept postponing, his heart gave out in his sleep. That's when I learned that even in death, some people keep fighting for you. Marcus Reese died on a Tuesday in January, and I wasn't allowed to say goodbye. Victoria called me 3 hours after it happened, not to comfort me, but to inform me that immediate family only would be present for the private viewing. The funeral program listed his survivors in order of importance: Victoria, Isabel, various Sterling relatives. My name appeared at the bottom, under "and other relatives," like an afterthought in 8-point font. The will reading was scheduled for the following week. I received an email from Victoria's assistant. You'll receive a small remembrance from the estate. Your presence at the reading is not required. Not required. After 27 years, I wasn't even worth a seat in the lawyer's office. But David Thornton, Marcus's personal attorney for 40 years, had other plans. His first voicemail came the day after the funeral. Miss Reese, it's urgent we speak about your grandfather's wishes. Please call me directly. Victoria must have intercepted it somehow because an hour later, I received a text from her. David is confused in his grief. All estate matters go through me now. The second voicemail was more insistent. Celia, your grandfather left specific instructions. You have rights that... The message cut off. When I tried calling back, his secretary informed me that all Sterling Reese estate inquiries were being handled by Victoria's legal team. Then came the email that changed everything. Hidden in my spam folder, dated one day before Marcus died, was a draft he'd never sent. My dear Celia, you are always my true heir. Not just of money, but of purpose. Your parents died exposing the truth, and I've been a coward for not telling you sooner. Forgive me for not protecting you from them. The foundation was always meant to be yours. 3 weeks after Marcus's death, Victoria announced the Providence Foundation's restructuring at a board meeting I learned about through Instagram. Isabel posted photos of herself at the podium, ##NewGeneration, #LegacyLeader. My design work had been scrubbed from all the foundation's materials overnight, replaced with a sterile corporate template that probably cost $50,000 and converted half as well. I was refilling my coffee at a midtown Starbucks when I overheard the conversation that made my blood freeze. 2 women from Victoria's charity circle were gossiping by the pickup counter. Isabel told me once they control the full fund, the renovation loans will be untraceable. Brilliant, really. Who audits a charity doing community development? My hand shook as I recorded the rest on my phone. They detailed shell companies, phantom contractors, inflated invoices, $30 million being systematically drained from Marcus's foundation. The renovation projects were real estate money laundering, and Victoria was using her father-in-law's legacy to clean dirty money. That evening, Victoria summoned me to a family meeting at the estate. Her text was formal, cold. 8 p.m. sharp. We need to discuss your future relationship with this family. She'd never been subtle, but this felt like an execution notice. I spent the afternoon at David Thornton's office. His secretary snuck me in through the service entrance, and what he showed me changed everything. The original will, notarized and video witnessed, with my name as primary beneficiary. The timestamp showed Marcus had signed it just 2 weeks before his death. But there was a catch. A crucial detail Victoria had missed in her haste to forge amendments. She doesn't know about the trigger clause, David whispered, and tomorrow night, you need to let her bury herself. The dining room at the Sterling Reese estate had never felt more like a courtroom. 20 relatives sat around the mahogany table, their Hermès and Chanel bags placed precisely on the sideboard like exhibits. The baccarat chandelier cast shadows that seemed to dance with anticipation. Victoria stood at the head of the table, a glass of Dom Perignon, 1996, in her manicured hand. Family, she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd never been challenged. We need to address the elephant in the room. She looked directly at me. Or should I say, the interloper. Nervous laughter rippled through the room. Uncle James shifted uncomfortably. Cousin Margaret suddenly found her napkin fascinating. Celia, Victoria continued, for 27 years, we've tolerated your presence out of respect for Marcus's misguided compassion. But with him gone, it's time for honesty. She took a sip of champagne, savoring the moment. You are not, have never been, and will never be sterling material. From now on, I will decide if and when you're invited to family functions. Stop inviting yourself. The silence was suffocating. Isabella smirked from her seat, twirling her Cartier love bracelet. Mom's right. It's actually cruel to keep pretending, don't you think? Some people are born for this life. Others, well, they're just born. Victoria walked over to an antique secretary desk and pulled out a document. With a red Mont Blanc pen, Marcus's pen, I realized, she dramatically crossed my name from what appeared to be a family tree. I can't believe I ever lowered myself to call you my daughter. You were never anywhere near our level. 20 pairs of eyes watched, waiting for me to break. Instead, I noticed something else. David Thornton's business card, hidden under my place setting. Before I could process the business card, Isabel stood up, producing a leather portfolio from her Birkin bag. "Since we're being honest," she said, her smile sharp as winter ice, "there's paperwork to discuss." She slid a document across the mahogany toward me. "Voluntary disassociation from the Reese Family Trust. Sign it, and we all move forward cleanly. Refuse." She paused, examining her manicure, "and will be forced to pursue legal action for the design work you stole from the foundation." "Stole?" I finally spoke, my voice steadier than I felt. "All work product created for the foundation belongs to the foundation," Isabel continued. "Using those designs in your portfolio, that's intellectual property theft. Every client you've ever had will make sure they know you're a fraud who built her little business on stolen designs." The relatives watched like spectators at a gladiator match. Aunt Patricia whispered something to her husband. Uncle James cleared his throat and finally spoke. "It's for the best, dear. Sign the papers. Make a clean break." Victoria added the final twist. "We're also requesting you legally change your last name. Reese is not yours to carry anymore." I picked up the pen, Marcus's pen that Victoria had used to strike my name. The weight of it felt significant. Everyone leaned in, expecting surrender. Instead, I set it down gently and stood up. "I heard you clearly," I said, looking Victoria in the eye. "I won't impose anymore." I removed the family ring from my finger, the one Marcus had given me for my 18th birthday, and placed it on the Italian marble table. It made the smallest, most satisfying crack. As I walked out, I palmed David Thornton's card. Whatever game was being played, I was about to learn the real rules. If you've ever been told you don't belong, that you're not enough, that your very presence is a burden, I need you to hear what happens next. Because the papers they wanted me to sign, they would have hidden the biggest financial crime in New York charity history. Hit subscribe if you want to see how justice actually feels, and comment below if you've ever been underestimated by family. I walked through that house one last time, past the Monet in the hallway I'd always loved, past the library where Marcus taught me chess, past the kitchen where the staff used to sneak me cookies when Victoria wasn't looking. I stopped at the coat closet and removed every piece of jewelry Victoria had given me over the years. The pearl necklace for my 16th birthday, the diamond studs for college graduation, the tennis bracelet she'd called an investment in your appearance. I left them all on the marble console table, arranged like evidence. My laptop bag was all I carried, my real work, my actual life. As I reached the door, Victoria called out one final barb. "Don't expect any references. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you are. Nothing." The February air hit my face like freedom. I didn't cry. I didn't run. I walked to my beat-up Honda Civic, the car Isabel once called a mobile advertisement for failure, and sat there for a moment, David Thornton's business card burning in my pocket. That's when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Check your email. DT." The attachment was a video file, timestamped from 2 weeks before Marcus died. I pressed play and heard my grandfather's voice. "If you're watching this, Celia, then Victoria has finally shown her true colors. What I'm about to tell you will change everything. Your parents didn't die in an accident. They were murdered for trying to expose what Victoria's family was doing, and now she's doing it again with my foundation." The video was 43 minutes long. By the end, I understood why David had risked his career to contact me, and why Victoria was about to lose everything she'd stolen. For 2 weeks, I disappeared from their world completely. No social media, no responses to the few relatives who texted checking in while really fishing for drama. I met David Thornton at a diner in Queens, far from any Sterling Reese eyes. He slid a manila folder across the cracked Formica table. The original will, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Marcus named you primary beneficiary of the Providence Foundation Trust, $50 million under your sole control. My coffee cup rattled against the saucer. That's impossible, Victoria said. Victoria forged an amendment after Marcus died, but she made a critical error. David pointed to a clause highlighted in yellow. Any changes to the trust require the beneficiary's signature once they reach 30. You turned 32 last month. The deadline has passed. Her forgery is worthless. He showed me the paper trail. Victoria's sloppy attempt to backdate documents, the notary who'd mysteriously received a $50,000 bonus, the board members who'd been promised construction contracts for their silence. But the smoking gun was a notification from the bank. They'd frozen the foundation accounts pending verification of the legitimate trustee. Victoria discovered this yesterday, David said. She's been calling me every hour. As if on cue, my phone rang. Victoria's name appeared. The first time she'd called me directly in years. I let it go to voicemail. Then another call, and another. By the sixth call, I answered. Celia, her voice had lost its imperial edge. There's been a misunderstanding about Marcus's wishes. We need to talk. We have nothing to discuss. I'm coming to your apartment tonight. She hung up before I could refuse. David looked at me across the table. Are you ready for this? I thought about the video Marcus had left, about my parents, about 27 years of humiliation. I've been ready my whole life. Victoria Sterling Reese stood in the hallway of my Brooklyn walk-up at 11 p.m., looking like she'd been teleported from another dimension. Her usual Chanel suit was wrinkled, her perfect chignon falling apart. The woman who wouldn't leave her penthouse without full makeup had mascara smudged under her eyes. She stood in her $3,000 Louboutins, staring at my welcome mat from Dollar Tree. May I come in? She couldn't even look me in the eye. I let her wait 5 seconds before stepping aside. She entered my 600-square-foot studio, her gaze sliding over my IKEA furniture and thrift store art. The woman who owned a Basquiat was now begging for mercy in an apartment that cost less than her monthly champagne budget. There's been a terrible misunderstanding, she began, clutching her Hermes bag like a life preserver. Marcus's will, the lawyers are saying you're the primary beneficiary. It's not a misunderstanding, it's the truth. Her composure cracked. The foundation has commitments, projects already announced. The gala is in 3 days. 500 donors are expecting. She stopped, recalculating. I'll give you $5 million, cash. Just sign a retroactive waiver. No. $10 million, and you can keep the Reese name. I almost laughed. The name you demanded I give up 2 weeks ago? She sank onto my second-hand couch, a woman drowning in her own schemes. You don't understand. We've already announced the restructuring to major donors. If what comes out, Victoria? That you forged documents? That you've been laundering money through fake renovations? The color drained from her face. She didn't know I knew about the money laundering. She thought this was just about the will. 15 million, she whispered. That's everything I have, Liquid. I let Victoria's offer hang in the air while I poured myself tea from my grandmother's chipped teapot, my real grandmother, the one who'd raised my mother. Victoria watched me like a defendant watching a jury deliberate. 15 million, I repeated slowly. That's quite a jump from your nothing. The doorbell rang. Victoria flinched. Through the peephole I saw Isabel, dressed down in designer casual, a $5,000 attempt at looking approachable. You brought backup, I observed, opening the door. Isabel entered with a different energy than her mother, less desperate, more calculating. Celia, let's be rational about this. We're still family, despite everything. Family? I pulled out my phone and hit record, placing it openly on the coffee table. Is that what you call people you threaten with lawsuits? Isabel's smile tightened. That was harsh. I apologize. We were all grieving Marcus differently. She touched my shoulder, the first time she'd voluntarily made physical contact in years. He wouldn't want this conflict, you know that. Victoria found her voice again. Marcus was confused in his final weeks. The medication, his heart condition. He wasn't thinking clearly when he changed the will. The will dated 2 weeks before his death? I asked. When he was lucid enough to record a 43-minute video explaining exactly why he was doing it, they exchanged panicked glances. They didn't know about the video. Isabel recovered first. Videos can be edited, manipulated, but think about the foundation's reputation, the children it helps. Do you really want to destroy Marcus's legacy over a family squabble? She produced a folder from her bag. Sign these papers, backdate them, everyone wins. The foundation continues, you're set for life, and we all move forward. Together, Victoria added desperately. As a family. Victoria's transformation was Oscar-worthy. The Ice Queen who'd publicly disowned me 2 weeks ago now had tears streaming down her face, smearing her Tom Ford foundation into tragic streaks. I raised you as my own, she whispered, reaching for my hand. I let her take it, feeling her desperate grip. For 27 years, I gave you everything, the best schools, the best opportunities. When you had nightmares about your parents, who held you? When you graduated from Parsons, who was in the front row? You were, I admitted. Right before you told everyone I was there on a charity scholarship. She pressed on, ignoring the barb. Marcus would want the family united. You know how he hated conflict. Please, Celia, one signature and we all move forward. Isabel pulled out the backdated documents, already prepared with tabs marking where I should sign. The foundation has pledges worth $20 million pending. Children's programs that will shut down if there's a scandal. Is your pride worth destroying all that good? I picked up the papers, scanning the language. They'd thought of everything. Retroactive transfer of beneficiary status, waiver of all claims, even an NDA preventing me from ever discussing the will. Under the table, I texted someone. They just admitted everything, paperwork ready. You've practiced this, I said to Victoria. The tears. She stiffened. They're real. Like the tears at your 2 divorces? Isabel's father, then James? You got $40 million from those tears. Isabel's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and went pale. Mom, we need to go. Not until she signs, Victoria insisted. Another buzz. Isabel showed her mother the screen. Whatever she saw made Victoria's practiced tears stop instantly. You called them, Victoria said, her voice deadly quiet. You called the FBI. Let me back up 3 months. Before Marcus died, before the humiliation dinner, before any of this exploded, Agent Sarah Coleman knocked on my apartment door. FBI Financial Crimes Division, investigating Sterling real estate for money laundering through charitable organizations. Your grandfather contacted us, she'd explained, sitting in the same spot where Victoria now sat. He suspected his foundation was being used to wash money from Sterling's criminal clients, drug cartels, human traffickers. He wanted to gather evidence before he died. Marcus had been playing a longer game than anyone realized. Every family dinner where I'd been humiliated, he'd been watching Victoria and Isabel, documenting their conversations, tracking the money. The confused old man they thought they were manipulating had been building a federal case. He knew he was dying, Agent Coleman had said. He wanted to protect you and preserve his real legacy, so he changed his will, knowing it would force Victoria's hand. For 3 months, I'd been their inside source. Every insulting family gathering, every overheard conversation, every document I could photograph, it all went to the FBI. The night Victoria disowned me, I was wearing a wire. Her confession about the renovation loans at the family dinner, recorded and admissible. The video Marcus left wasn't just about my parents. It contained financial records, account numbers, names of shell companies. He'd gathered everything the FBI needed but couldn't obtain without warrants. As his beneficiary, I could legally provide it all. Now, sitting in my apartment with Victoria and Isabel, I watched their panic bloom as they realized the trap they'd walked into, the backdated documents they'd brought. They'd just provided evidence of attempted fraud, the $15 million bribe, wire fraud, and obstruction of justice. The gala is in 3 days, I said calmly. You should still attend. Victoria and Isabel left my apartment in shambles, their designer heels clicking frantically down the stairs. Within an hour, David Thornton called. They're trying to move the money offshore, 30 million scheduled for transfer tomorrow morning. Let them try, Agent Coleman said on our three-way call. We've frozen the accounts. They just don't know it yet. The Providence Foundation Gala was in 72 hours. Victoria had already sent 500 invitations, secured sponsorships, promised major announcements about the foundation's new direction. The mayor would attend. 3 senators, every major philanthropist in New York. She can't cancel now, David explained. It would trigger investor panic, donor flight. She's trapped. I spent the next day with Agent Coleman's team, preparing evidence presentations. The forensic accountants had traced every dollar, 30 million diverted through 17 shell companies, all leading back to Sterling Real Estate's development projects that existed only on paper. Ghost renovations in neighborhoods that desperately needed real help. 3 board members want out, David informed me. Thomas Chen, Maria Rodriguez, and Jennifer Walsh. They've suspected for years but were afraid of Victoria's influence. They'll support you when the time comes. I worked through the night designing something special, a transparency initiative presentation that would display real-time foundation finances, every dollar tracked, every project verified, the opposite of Victoria's shadow empire. My phone buzzed with texts from relatives. Heard you're not coming to the gala? Victoria says you're having a breakdown. Such a shame about the family situation. Let them gossip. In 48 hours, they'd have something real to talk about. I bought my first designer dress, not to impress them, but to honor Marcus. Carolina Herrera, simple and elegant, the kind of understated power Victoria never understood. The saleswoman asked what the occasion was. A funeral, I said, for an empire. Every document, every recording, every piece of evidence was legal and admissible. No tricks, no lies, just the truth they thought they'd buried with my grandfather. If you've ever wanted to see what happens when the untouchable finally get touched by justice, keep watching. And if someone in your life needs to hear this story, share it with them. Sometimes we all need reminders that dignity beats dynasty. The morning of the gala, I stood in David Thornton's office as he handed me a folder that weighed more than its paper should. The board resolution, he said. Once you present the original will tonight, you automatically assume control. Victoria's amendments are void. She knows this, but she's gambling you won't show up. What's her plan? Announce she's donating her entire personal fortune to the foundation. Play the grieving daughter-in-law card. Lock in donor sympathy before you can act. He paused. She's also hired private security to keep you out if you try to attend. I smiled. She's forgetting something. As the legal beneficiary, I don't need an invitation to my own foundation's event. Agent Coleman called. We'll have 12 agents there as donors. The moment you present evidence, we move. The arrest warrants are signed and sealed. I spent the afternoon at Marcus's grave, placing fresh orchids, his favorite. Tonight, grandfather, I whispered. Tonight, your real legacy lives. My phone had 43 missed calls from Victoria, each voicemail more desperate. The last one was different. If you show up tonight, I'll destroy you. I have information about your parents you don't want public. Stay away, or everyone will know what they really were. She thought she could still intimidate me. She didn't know Marcus had already told me everything. My parents were FBI informants who'd discovered the Sterling family's first money laundering scheme 27 years ago. They died before they could testify. Victoria had married into the family 2 years later, inheriting their criminal enterprise along with their fortune. I put on the Carolina Herrera dress, pinned my grandmother's simple pearl brooch to the lapel, and looked in the mirror. Not at the charity case, not at the outsider, but at the woman my parents would have raised me to be. The Waldorf Astoria's grand ballroom glittered with 500 of New York's elite. $50,000 of orchids cascaded from the ceiling. A champagne tower reached toward crystal chandeliers that had witnessed a century of power plays, but none like tonight's. Victoria stood at the podium, resplendent in vintage Valentino, addressing the crowd. The Providence Foundation enters a new era tonight. My beloved father-in-law Marcus would be so proud. That's when I entered through the main doors. The private security moved to intercept me, but David Thornton's voice rang out. Let her through. She's the primary beneficiary of the Marcus Reese Trust. 500 heads turned in synchronized shock. The mayor's mouth opened slightly. Senator Williams nearly dropped his champagne. But the best reaction was Victoria's, her face cycling through disbelief, rage, and fear in the span of 3 seconds. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, my voice carrying across the silent ballroom, I apologize for the interruption, but there are urgent legal matters regarding the Providence Foundation that require immediate disclosure. Isabel rushed to the podium, grabbing the microphone. This is a private event. Security! Ms. Sterling Reese, Agent Coleman said, stepping forward with her badge visible. I'd advise against that. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like waves. Phones appeared, recording everything. The gossip columnists who'd documented my humiliation for years now had their story of the century. Victoria found her voice. This is ridiculous. She's nobody. A disturbed woman we tried to help. I'm the legal controlling trustee of the Providence Foundation, I interrupted, holding up the original will. As of tonight, all foundation operations are under my authority. The champagne tower seemed to tremble, or maybe that was just Victoria's world starting to collapse. David Thornton took the microphone with the gravitas of 40 years of legal practice. The ballroom fell silent, except for the scratch of reporters' pens and the soft whir of phone cameras. Ladies and gentlemen, as executor of the Marcus Reese estate, I have a legal obligation to inform you of the following. The last will and testament of Marcus Reese, dated January 15, 2024, names Ms. Celia Reese as primary beneficiary and controlling trustee of the Providence Foundation's $50 million endowment. Gasps echoed off the Waterford crystal. I watched donors exchange panicked glances, calculating their exposure. David continued. Any amendments made after Mr. Reese's death have been ruled invalid due to lack of proper authorization and evidence of forgery. This is slander, Victoria shrieked, her composure finally shattering completely. I'll sue you into oblivion. Mrs. Sterling Reese, David replied calmly, you're welcome to contest this in court. However, I should note that attempting to transfer foundation funds this morning, while knowing of this dispute, constitutes fraud. The crowd erupted. The mayor stepped back from Victoria, as if she were radioactive. Donors pulled out phones, calling their lawyers. Isabella tried to leave, but found agents blocking the exits. Not obviously, but effectively. Thomas Chen, one of the board members who'd contacted me, stood up. I motion for an immediate board vote to confirm Ms. Celia Reese as CEO of the Providence Foundation. Seconded, Maria Rodriguez called out. All in favor? David asked. 7 of the 9 board members raised their hands. Only Victoria and Isabel dissented, their hands frozen at their sides. Motion carried, David announced. Ms. Reese, would you like to address your donors? I walked to the podium, passing Victoria. She hissed, You don't know what you're doing. I learned from the best, I replied. You. Before I could speak, Victoria lunged for the microphone. Security moved, but I raised my hand to stop them. Let her dig her own grave. This is a conspiracy, she screamed at the crowd. This girl, this nobody we took in out of pity, she manipulated a dying man. Marcus had dementia. He didn't know what he was signing. Then you'll be interested in this, I said, pulling out my phone and connecting it to the ballroom's AV system. Marcus's face appeared on the massive screens, healthy and sharp-eyed, dated 2 weeks before his death. His voice filled the ballroom. I, Marcus Reese, being of sound mind and body, declare that my granddaughter Celia represents everything I built this foundation to be. She is not my biological grandchild, but she is my chosen heir, the daughter of 2 heroes who died trying to expose corruption. The crowd was transfixed. Victoria's face went white. Marcus continued. I leave control to Celia because Victoria and Isabel have betrayed everything this foundation stands for. They've stolen from children's programs to fund their real estate empire. I have provided evidence to the appropriate authorities. Turn it off! Isabel shrieked, rushing the AV booth. 3 federal agents stepped forward, blocking her path, but Marcus wasn't done. Celia, your parents, Rebecca and James Morrison, were FBI informants. They discovered the Sterling family's money laundering operation. Their car accident was no accident. Victoria knows this. She married into this family to take control of what they built on blood. The ballroom erupted. Victoria grabbed a champagne flute and threw it at the screen, an echo of that Waterford crystal 2 weeks ago. It shattered harmlessly against the wall as security finally restrained her. "You were nothing!" she screamed at me. "I gave you everything!" "No," I said into the microphone. "Marcus gave me everything. You just took the credit." With Victoria restrained and the crowd riveted, I clicked to the next slide. A forensic accounting report filled the screen, every number damning. Over the past 5 years, I announced, $30 million designated for children's programs has been diverted through shell companies, renovations that never happened, community centers that exist only on paper. While the Sterling Reese family built their real estate empire, thousands of children went without the help Marcus intended. The slides advanced. Invoices for phantom contractors, bank transfers to offshore accounts, emails between Victoria and Isabel discussing how to hide the trail. Each piece of evidence drew sharper gasps from the crowd. "That's privileged information," Isabel shouted. "You had no right." "Actually," Agent Coleman said, stepping to the podium, "as the legal trustee, Ms. Reese had every right to audit foundation records. And what she found required federal intervention." She held up her badge for the crowd to see. "I'm Agent Sarah Coleman, FBI Financial Crimes Division. We've been investigating Sterling real estate for 3 years. The evidence Ms. Reese provided has resulted in federal warrants for Victoria Sterling Reese and Isabel Sterling Reese." 3 major donors stood up. Richard Blackstone, whose foundation had given millions, spoke first. "We suspected irregularities. We've been conducting our own investigation for months." Another donor, Patricia Shue, added, "We were prepared to pull funding. Only Marcus's reputation kept us involved." The dominoes were falling faster than Victoria could process. Her empire, built on 30 years of lies, was collapsing in 30 minutes. "This is entrapment," Victoria screamed. "Celia orchestrated this." "No," I said quietly, the microphone catching every word. "You orchestrated this when you stole from children to build your fortune. I just made sure everyone could see it." Agent Coleman nodded to her team. They moved through the crowd with practiced precision, their evening wear concealing federal badges. The $500 champagne flute stopped clinking. The orchestra fell silent. Even the waitstaff froze. "Victoria Sterling Reese," Agent Coleman announced, her voice carrying across the ballroom, "you're under arrest for wire fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. You have the right to remain silent." "This is impossible," Victoria struggled against the agents. "Do you know who I am? I own half of Manhattan." "Isabel Sterling Reese," another agent continued, approaching the podium where Isabel stood frozen. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud and money laundering." Isabel's carefully constructed composure shattered. Her designer mascara ran in black rivers down her cheeks. "Celia, please, we're family. Tell them this is a mistake." "The only mistake," I said, "was Marcus believing you could change." The handcuffs clicked onto Victoria's wrists, the same wrists that wore the Cartier Panthère watch Marcus had given her, the same hands that had signed my adoption papers 30 years ago and my dismissal 2 weeks ago. Photographers pushed forward, their flashes creating a strobe effect as New York society's queen was dethroned in real time. Tomorrow's headlines were writing themselves. "You'll regret this," Victoria spat as agents led her past me. "I know things about your parents you'll never recover from." "I know everything," I replied calmly. "Marcus told me. They died as heroes. You lived as a thief." As they were escorted out, the crowd parted like the Red Sea. Senator Williams was already on his phone with his lawyer. The mayor had disappeared entirely. But the donors, the real ones who cared about Marcus's vision, began to applaud. The ballroom screens flickered back to life. Marcus appeared again, but this was a different recording, one even I hadn't seen. David Thornton stood beside me, his hand supportive on my shoulder. "If you're watching this," Marcus said, "then justice has been served. Celia, my dear one, there's more you need to know." The crowd fell silent again, everyone leaning in. Your parents, Rebecca and James Morrison, weren't just informants. They were heroes who gave up everything to protect children from the Sterling crime family's trafficking networks. Yes, the money laundering was just the beginning. They discovered the Sterlings were washing profits from human trafficking. Collective gasps echoed through the ballroom. Several people sat down heavily in their chairs. "Rebecca was my goddaughter," Marcus continued, tears visible on his weathered face. "When she came to me with evidence, I was too cowardly to act. I thought I could change Victoria from within the family. I was wrong. Your parents died because I hesitated." My knees nearly buckled. David steadied me. "The foundation was always meant to be yours, Celia, not as inheritance, but as justice. Every dollar we raised, I raised thinking of the children your parents died trying to save. You were 5 when they were killed. Victoria fought the adoption, but I threatened to expose everything if she didn't agree. My greatest regret is not protecting you from her cruelty." The video paused. Then Marcus looked directly at the camera. "The Providence Foundation's $50 million is just the beginning. There's another $100 million in a trust your parents established before they died. It becomes yours on your 33rd birthday, next month. Use it to build what they envisioned, a foundation that actually protects children, not one that profits from their suffering." The recording ended. The ballroom was silent as a cathedral. The silence shattered as 300 phones rang simultaneously. Lawyers, publicists, crisis managers, everyone was in damage control mode. But the donors who mattered, the ones who shared Marcus's vision, approached me instead. Richard Blackstone was first. "Ms. Reese, the Blackstone Foundation pledges $10 million to match whatever transparency initiatives you implement." Patricia Shue followed. "The Shue Family Trust will double that, $20 million, but only under your leadership." Within 10 minutes, I had $70 million in pledged donations, more than Victoria had raised in 5 years. The board reconvened on the spot. Thomas Chen made the motion. "I propose Celia Reese as permanent CEO of Providence Foundation effective immediately." Unanimous approval, with 2 abstentions, Victoria and Isabel's seats now empty. The media frenzy was instant. Charity scandal rocks NYC elite. Adopted daughter exposes family empire. $50 million revenge. But my favorite headline would come later. The orphan who inherited justice. Uncle James approached me, shame etched on his face. I knew something was wrong. I should have spoken up. "That night at dinner, when Victoria humiliated you." He pulled out an envelope. "I've been feeding information to David for months. I'm sorry it took me so long to find my courage." More relatives lined up, each with apologies and business cards, trying to distance themselves from Victoria's fall. I accepted none of them. "The foundation will undergo a complete audit," I announced to the crowd. "Every dollar will be tracked, every program verified. We're implementing blockchain transparency. Anyone will be able to see where donations go in real time." Sterling Real Estate's stock price was already plummeting. By morning, it would lose 60% of its value. By week's end, the company would be under federal receivership. 6 weeks later, I sat in a federal courthouse as the judge delivered sentences that made national news. "Victoria Sterling Reese," the judge intoned, "you have been found guilty on all counts. The court sentences you to 18 years in federal prison, forfeiture of all assets obtained through criminal enterprise, and lifetime prohibition from serving on any charitable board." Victoria, in her orange jumpsuit, looked like a stranger. The woman who wouldn't leave her penthouse without perfect makeup now faced nearly 2 decades without her hairdresser. "Isabel Sterling Reese, You are sentenced to 12 years, forfeiture of assets, and permanent revocation of all professional licenses. Isabel sobbed. Her husband had already filed for divorce and full custody of their children. The prenup she'd insisted on, protecting her assets from him, now meant she'd leave prison with nothing. The asset forfeiture was staggering. 30 million returned to the foundation, 40 million in real estate, accounts in the Caymans, Switzerland, Singapore. Every dollar they'd stolen, plus interest and penalties. The Sterling real estate building would become affordable housing, the ultimate irony for a company that had displaced thousands. The penthouse where I'd been humiliated would be converted into a shelter for trafficking survivors. But the real victory came from the others arrested in the sweep. 17 co-conspirators, including the notary who'd forged documents, contractors who'd created false invoices, and 3 city officials who'd approved phantom permits. Agent Coleman found me after the sentencing. Your parents would be proud. This was the case they died trying to build. It's not over, I said. There are more foundations like this. More Victorias hiding behind charity. She smiled. Good thing you have 150 million to fight them with. The Morrison Trust had matured the week before. My parents' justice fund was finally mine. I kept my Brooklyn apartment. That surprised everyone. With 150 million at my disposal, I could have bought any penthouse in Manhattan. Instead, I stayed in my 600-square-foot studio, though I did upgrade from IKEA to some pieces from local craftsmen. The Providence Foundation underwent a complete transformation. We hired a diverse board. No nepotism, no society connections required. Just people who understood what Marcus had really wanted, to help children who, like me, had nowhere else to turn. Our first initiative was revolutionary. Complete financial transparency. Every donation, every expense, visible in real time on our website. The UX design, my little computer drawings, won 3 international awards for nonprofit innovation. I drove to work in my Honda Civic, past the Sterling real estate building now covered in scaffolding for its conversion. My office wasn't the corner suite. I'd converted that into a children's library. I worked from a modest room overlooking the community garden we'd built on what used to be Victoria's private parking garage. The foundation helped 12,000 children in our first year. Real help: education, housing, therapy, legal aid for trafficking survivors. We partnered with the FBI to create safe houses for informants' families, people like my parents who risked everything for justice. My design firm, Morrison Creative, named for my parents, took on only ethical clients. We became the go-to agency for nonprofits wanting to maximize their impact through technology. The girl who was just playing with pixels now designed systems that moved millions toward real change. The media loved the story. From charity case to charity CEO. The billion-dollar rejection. But I turned down most interviews. The work mattered more than the narrative. Victoria wrote me every week from prison. I donated $100 to trafficking survivors for each letter I didn't open. 6 months into Victoria's sentence, I received an unexpected visitor. Jonathan Sterling, Victoria's older brother, the family patriarch who'd stayed silent through everything. I owe you an apology, he said, standing in my modest office. I knew what Victoria was doing. We all did. But she had dirt on everyone. Affairs, tax evasion, worse. We were cowards. He placed a folder on my desk. These are the real books from the last 30 years. Every crime, every victim, every dollar. Victoria was just middle management. The trafficking ring goes deeper. The documents revealed a network spanning 3 continents. Politicians, judges, business titans, all connected through charities that were actually fronts for moving money and children. Why now? I asked. Because you did what none of us could. You stood up to her. He paused. And because I have terminal cancer, 6 months, maybe less, I want to die with some shred of dignity. We spent 3 hours recording his testimony. By the end, we had enough to trigger the largest trafficking investigation in U.S. history. That night, I visited Marcus's grave with fresh orchids and good news. Your foundation just helped the FBI identify 300 missing children. They're coming home, grandfather. A text interrupted my moment of peace. From David Thornton. Isabel's lawyer is requesting a meeting. She wants to make a deal. I knew what she'd offer. Information in exchange for reduced sentence. The golden child was ready to burn whatever remained of the Sterling Empire to save herself. Let her rot, I texted back. Then reconsidered. Actually, set the meeting. But she comes to us. Even in victory, Marcus had taught me to be strategic. Every piece of information mattered when children's lives were at stake. The meeting with Isabel taught me something vital. Family isn't about blood or adoption papers or even shared history. It's about shared values. She sat across from me in the federal facility, orange jumpsuit replacing Chanel, offering names and bank accounts in exchange for my influence with prosecutors. But when I asked about the children, where they were taken, who hurt them, she shrugged. I didn't handle that side, she said, examining her ruined manicure. That was all Victoria. Even facing 12 years in prison, she couldn't take responsibility. The golden child was still trying to preserve her guilt, not realizing it had already flaked away. I learned that when someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Victoria showed me at that first Sunday dinner when I was 5, placing me at the far end of the table. Isabel showed me when she laughed at her mother's cruelty instead of questioning it. Document everything, especially with family business. Marcus knew this. Every receipt, every recording, every email. He'd built an evidence fortress that even Victoria's lawyers couldn't breach. True wealth isn't measured in portfolios or properties. It's in the power to lift others. The Morrison Reese Foundation, I'd added my parents' name, had more impact with thoughtful millions than Victoria had with stolen billions. And sometimes, the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's massive, undeniable success that helps others, while your enemies watch from federal prison. I kept Marcus's chess set in my office, the one he'd taught me on. Always think 7 moves ahead, he'd said. But the most important lesson was simpler. Sometimes the pawn becomes the queen, not through promotion, but through persistence. They were right. I'd never be on their level. I'd built my own, several floors above theirs. 1 year later, I stood at the ribbon cutting for the Morrison Reese Children's Center, built where a Sterling shell company had claimed to renovate. 300 supporters gathered, including 40 children who'd been rescued through our trafficking intervention program. A little girl tugged on my dress. A Carolina Herrera, bought for this occasion. She was 7, recently adopted after being rescued from one of the trafficking rings we'd exposed. Ms. Celia, are you really the boss of all this? I knelt to her level, remembering being 5 years old, feeling small in a world of giants who didn't want me. No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who learned that love isn't measured by bloodlines or bank accounts. My new mom says you were adopted too, she whispered. Did your first family not want you? The crowd quieted, sensing the moment's weight. I saw reporters lean in, cameras focusing. My first family were heroes who died protecting children like you, I said. My second family. They taught me what I didn't want to become. But my real family... I gestured to David Thornton, Agent Coleman, the board members who'd stood up for justice, the donors who'd believed in change. They chose me, and I chose them. That's what makes us family. She smiled, then surprised me. My name's Victoria. Is that okay? The cosmic irony wasn't lost on anyone. I hugged her tight. It's perfect. You'll make that name mean something beautiful. As the ribbon fell and applause erupted, I noticed a woman in the crowd, elegant, familiar. Jonathan Sterling's daughter, Elizabeth, who'd stayed silent through the scandal. She approached with an envelope. From my father's estate, she said quietly. He died yesterday. He wanted you to have this. Inside, a check for $50 million and a note. For the children we failed to protect, make it right. If this story resonated with you, Please subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't determined by anyone else's inability to see it. Comment below with your own story of proving doubters wrong. I read every single one. And remember, the best response to being told you're not enough is to become more than they ever imagined possible. Thank you for watching.